Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Aaron Sparks. I'm a sergeant with the Newbury Police Department. I just want to say I hope everybody's doing well. Everybody's staying safe. Everybody's still learning a lot in school and getting ready for the summertime. I'm going to be reading you Chapter 2 of Alice in Wonderland, which was a book I got to read when I was younger, too. So, I look forward to reading it for you guys, and I hope you enjoy it as much as we did. Chapter 2 is The Pool of Tears. Curiouser and curiouser, cried Alice. She was so surprised that for the moment she quite forgot how to speak good English. Now I'm opening up the largest telescope there ever was. Goodbye, feet, for when she looked down, her feet, they seemed to be almost out of sight. They were so far off. Oh, my poor little feet. I wonder who will put on your shoes and stockings for you now, dears. I'm sure I shan't be able. I shall be in a great deal too far off. You must manage the best way you can, but I must be kind to them, thought Alice, or perhaps they won't walk the way I want to. Let me see. I'll give them a new pair of boots every Christmas. Then she went on planning how she would manage it. They must go by the carrier, she thought. How funny it'll seem, sending presents to one's own feet, and how odd the directions will look. Alice's right foot, hearthrug, near the fender, with Alice's love. Oh dear, what nonsense I'm talking, she said. Just then her head struck the roof of the hall. She was now more than 9 feet high. She at once took a look at the golden key and hurried off to the garden door. Poor Alice. It was as much as she could do, lying on one side, to look into the garden with one eye. But to get through was more hopeless than ever. She sat down and began to cry again. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, said Alice. A great girl like you going on this way. Stop this moment, I tell you. But she went on all the same, shedding gallons of tears until there was a large pool round her, reaching half down the hall. After a time, she heard the pattering of feet in the distance, and she hastily dried her eyes. It was a white rabbit returning, splendidly dressed, with a pair of white kid gloves in one hand and a large fan in the other. He trotted along in a great hurry, muttering to himself, Oh, the Duchess, oh, won't she be savage if I've kept her waiting? Alice felt so desperate that she was ready to ask help of anyone, so, when the rabbit came near, she began in a timid voice, If you please, sir. The rabbit started violently, dropped the white kid gloves and the fan, and scurried away into the darkness. Alice took up the fan and gloves, and as the hall was very hot, she fanned herself all the time she spoke. Dear, dear, how queer everything is today. And yesterday things went on just as usual. I wonder if it had been changed in the night. Let me think. Was I the same when I got up this morning? I almost think that I can remember feeling a little different. But if not the same, who in the world am I? Ah, that's a great puzzle. And she began thinking all over the children she knew that were of the same age as herself to see she could have been changed for any of them. I'm sure I'm not Ada, she said, for her hair goes in such long ringlets, mine doesn't go in ringlets at all. And I can't be Mabel, for I know all sorts of things, and she knows such a very little. Besides, she's she, and I'm I. And oh dear, puzzling as it is, I'll try if I know all the things I used to know. Let me see. 4 times 5 is 12, and 4 times 6 is 13, and 4 times 7 is... Oh dear, I shall never get to 20 at that rate. Let's try geography. London is the capital of Paris, Paris is the capital of Rome, and Rome... No, that's all wrong. I'm certain I must have been changed for Mabel. I'll try and say, how doth the little... She crossed her hands on her lap if she were saying lessons, and began to repeat, but her voice sounded so hoarse and strange, and the words did not come out as they used to. How doth the crocodile improve his shiny tail? and pour the waters of the Nile on every golden scale. How cheerfully he seems to grin, how neatly he spread his claws, and welcome fishes with only smiling jaws. I'm sure those are not the right words, said poor Alice, her eyes filled with tears again. As she went on, I must be Mabel after all. I shall have to go and live in that poky little house and have next to no toys to play with. And oh, ever so many lessons to learn. No, I've made up my mind about it. If I'm Mabel, I'll stray down here. It'll be no use their putting their heads down and saying, "Come up again, dear. I shall only look away. Who am I then? Tell me that first, and if I like being that person. I'll come up. If not, I'll stay down here till I'm somebody else. But dear, oh dear," cried Alice, "I do wish they would put their heads down. I am so very close to being all alone here." As she said this, she looked at her hands and was surprised to see that she had put on one of the rabbit's little white kid gloves while she was talking. How can I have done that, she thought. I must be growing small again. She got up and went to the table to measure herself by it and found that she was, nearly as she could guess, she was now about 2 feet high and was going on shrinking rapidly. She soon found out that one of the causes was the fan she was holding, and she dropped it hastily, just in time to avoid shrinking away altogether. That was a narrow escape, said Alice, a good deal frightened, but be very glad to find herself in existence. And now for the garden. She ran with speed all the way back to the little door. But alas, the little door was shut again, and the little golden keys was lying on the glass table as before, and things were worse than ever, thought this poor child, for I was never so small as this before, and I declare it's too bad that it is. As she said these words, her foot slipped, and in another moment, splash, she was up to her chin in salt water. Her first idea was she had somehow fallen into the sea. In that case, I can go back by railway, she said to herself. Alice had been to the seaside once in her life and had come to the general conclusion that wherever you go on the English coast, you can find a number of bathing machines in the sea, some children digging in with wooden spades, then a row of lodging houses, and behind them a railway station. However, she soon made out that she was in a pool of tears, which she had wept when she was 9 feet high. I wish I hadn't cried so much, said Alice, as she swam about, trying to find her way out. I shall be punished for it now, I suppose, being drowned in my own tears. That will be a queer thing, to be sure. However, everything is queer today. Just then she heard something splashing in the pool a little way off. She swam nearer to make out what it was, thought it might be a walrus or a hippopotamus. But then she remembered how small she was. It was only a mouse that had slipped in like herself. Would it be of any use now, thought Alice, to speak to this mouse? Everything is so out of the way down here. I think it can likely talk. At any rate, there's no harm in trying. Oh, mouse, do you know the way out of this pool? I am tired of swimming. Oh, mouse. Alice thought this might be the right way to speaking to a mouse, as she had never done such a thing before. But she remembered, in her brother's Latin grammar, a mouse, of a mouse, to a mouse, oh mouse. The mouse looked at her inquisitively, and then seemed to wink with one of his little eyes, but said nothing. Perhaps it doesn't understand English, thought Alice. I dare say it's a French mouse, come over with William the Conqueror. With all her knowledge of history, Alice had no clear notion on how long ago anything happened. She began to speak French, which was the first sentence in her French lesson book. The mouse gave a sudden leap out of the water and seemed to quiver all over. Oh, I beg your pardon, cried Alice hastily, afraid she had hurt the poor animal's feelings. I forgot you don't like cats. Would you like cats if you were me? Well, perhaps not, Alice said, speaking to the mouse. Don't be angry. And yet, I wish I could show you our cat, Dina. I think you'd take a fancy to cats if you could only see her. She's a dear, quiet thing, Alice went on, half to herself, as she swam lazily about the pool. And she sits purring nicely by the fire, licking her paws and washing her face. She's a nice, soft thing to a nurse, and she's a capital for catching mice. Oh, I beg your pardon, cried Alice again, For this time the mouse was bristling all over, and she felt certain he was really offended. "We won't talk about her any more if you'd rather not." "We indeed," said the mouse, who was trembling down to the end of his tail, "as if I could talk on such a subject. Our family always hated cats. Nasty, low, vulgar things. Don't let me hear the name again." "I won't indeed," said Alice, in a great hurry to change the subject. Are you fond of dogs?" The mouse did not answer. Alice went on eagerly. "There's such a nice little dog near our house I would like to show you. A little bright-eyed terrier with such a long curly brown hair. And it'll fetch things when you throw them, and it will sit up and beg for its dinner, and all sorts of things. I can't remember half of them, and it belongs to a farmer. And he says it's so useful, it's worth £100. He said he kills the rats and—" "Oh dear," cried Alice. "I'm afraid I've offended again," for the mouse was swimming away from her as hard as it could, and making quite a commotion in the pool as it went away. She called softly after it, "Mouse dear, do come back, and we won't talk about cats or dogs if you don't like them." When the mouse heard this, it turned around and swam slowly back to her, its face quite pale with passion, Alice thought. It said in a low, trembling voice, "Let's get to the shore, and I'll tell you my history, and you'll understand why it is I hate cats and dogs." It was high time to go for the pool, and it was getting quite crowded with the birds and animals that had fallen into it. There were a duck and a dodo, a lory and an eagle, and several other curious creatures. Alice led the way, and the whole party swam to the shore. That was Chapter 2 of Alice in Wonderland. Again, on behalf of the Newbury Police Department, I hope everybody's staying safe. Just remember, everyone, listen to your loved ones to be safe. And one thing you have to do during all this, you have to keep your rooms clean. I know you don't want to hear that, but you have to do it. Just make sure you keep everything clean. You listen to your loved ones. And the next time we read to you, I hope we get to do it in person. I hope everybody has a great week. And we're always on duty if you need us. Take care, everyone.